Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to provide you with an update on the impact of the conflict in Iran on the global economy because things have escalated again. Oil has now broken above $80 per barrel, which is the highest level we've seen since January 2025. Gas prices have surged by around 30%, and stock markets are now falling more aggressively. And the real concern is no longer just energy prices, it's inflation, interest rates, and government debt in 2026. This is no longer just a geopolitical story, this is now a macroeconomic story. So in this video, I'm going to explain why oil is rising, why gas is jumping sharply, what's happened in the Strait of Hormuz, the scale of the missile and drone attacks, and most importantly, how this feeds directly into inflation, interest rates, and borrowing costs. Now let's start with oil. Brent crude has now moved above $80 per barrel, the highest level since January, as I just said. But what's more important, it's a lot of analysts are now openly talking about oil potentially going above $100 per barrel if this disruption continues. And personally, I don't think $80 is going to be the top. I don't think this is the end of it. If the Strait of Hormuz remains under threat, and remember, roughly 20% of global seaborne oil flows through that narrow waterway, then the risk premium stays in the market. Shipping traffic is being reduced, insurance costs are rising, tankers are being rerouted. And this is all because Iran have come out and said that they will attack any tankers that are going through it. Now, even if the supply isn't fully shut off, the fear alone keeps prices elevated. And if this escalates or drags on, $90 or even $100 per barrel for oil is absolutely possible. Now let's talk about gas, because this is arguably even more important. Gas prices have surged by around 30%. Now, after Russia invaded Ukraine, many countries switched heavily towards LNG imports, liquefied natural gas, and much of that LNG moves through the Gulf region. If shipping lanes are disrupted or exporters are impacted, gas prices spike very quickly. And gas isn't just for heating and cooking. Many countries now use gas to produce electricity. So when gas prices rise, electricity costs rise, industrial energy costs rise, and manufacturing costs rise. And that feeds directly into inflation. I've even heard a UK government minister today saying that a 20% increase in gas prices could result in a direct 1% increase in inflation in the UK. So if you think about that, we're talking about 30% moves in gas prices right now. So that would indicate 1.5% on top of inflation. So this is not a small issue. This is material. And this is where much of the bigger problem comes from, because inflation starts rising again in 2026 due to higher energy costs, then central banks are not going to want to cut interest rates. Cutting rates in an inflationary environment just fuels inflation further. So instead of multiple rate cuts next year or this year, as we were expecting, we could be looking at fewer cuts or even no more cuts. And that's exactly what bond markets are starting to price in. So bond prices, which have an inverse relationship with interest rates, are now falling. And when bond prices fall, yields rise. And when yields rise, government borrowing costs go up. And that's a serious issue because governments are already carrying very high levels of debt, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom. Higher borrowing costs means higher interest payments on that debt. That squeezes public finances, it limits spending flexibility, and it increases fiscal pressure. So what started as a regional conflict is now feeding into global inflation expectations. Fewer interest rate cuts, falling bond prices, and rising government borrowing costs. And that's one of the key reasons stock markets are now under pressure. Equity markets don't like higher inflation. They don't like higher interest rates, and they definitely don't like rising bond yields. When bond yields go up, the valuation of stocks, especially growth stocks, comes under pressure. So this isn't just about oil companies. This is about the entire financing system repricing risk. If you have a look at this graphic from the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense, I think it really shows the scale of what's happening right now. According to this, 174 ballistic missiles were detected, 161 were intercepted, and 13 impacted in the sea. On top of that, 689 UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, basically drones, were detected, 645 were intercepted, and 44 impacted within state territory. 689 UAVs. That is sustained activity. And when attacks are happening at this scale across multiple Gulf states, the very region that underpins global oil and LNG supply, markets have to price in that risk. So what does all of this actually mean for everyday life? Well, firstly, it means higher oil prices, higher petrol and diesel costs, higher delivery and logistic costs, and more expensive imported goods. Higher gas prices mean higher electricity bills, higher business energy costs, and pressure on household budgets, and that feeds into inflation. And if inflation rises again in 2026, central banks delay interest rate cuts, borrowing costs stay higher, government debt becomes more expensive to service, business investment slows, and economic growth weakens. So the overall summary of today's video is that oil has moved above $80 per barrel, and I don't believe that's where it's going to stop. Gas prices are up around 30%, pushing up electricity and business costs, which feeds directly into inflation. Higher inflation means fewer interest rate cuts in 2026. Bond prices fall, borrowing costs rise, and heavily indebted governments feel pressure. And that combination is now causing major concern in financial markets. And that's why stock markets are falling. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. If you'd like to get involved in that, please scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below. Thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me in other ways. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, I really appreciate that support. It really helps to keep me going. And here's something to put a smile on your face.